until somebody else comes on. My chapstick. Hey, body. Hey, body, wanna come? Come on. Here. Hey, come on. Let me see. Come on, buddy. Come on, sweet. Come on, my buddy. Who is on for tonight? First, it's Matt. All right, let me do this. Two people on the right. Oh, there's three and one. I have to think about how I'm gonna. I need to go. Three little birds. Okay. Oh, all right. Hmm. All right. Hey, you know, come on here. Come on. Come on, babe. What do you need me to do here? Come here. All right. Okay. Now I'm gonna start letting. Okay. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Doing good, doing good.
Survived that snowstorm?
Yeah, we're getting used to it now, right?
All right. We might as well move to Alaska while we're at it. All right.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for Judy and then Ken, but I don't know. They're not in yet. I did just text Judy and she said she's on her way. Crap, she forgot to sign up. That's what she sent me.
Oh,
All right, hold on. I could probably see if I can send her the. I want to do this. I don't know if I can do this. I don't think I can. Unless I close it all the way down, which I don't want to do. So,
What does she need?
she need to get, can you email her the link?
Yeah.
Because I'm not able to copy the link from where I am. Oh, but wait, I know how I
Yeah,
can do
you
it.
sent it to.
Yep. All right, and then what I need to do is I need to look for, let's do this. Dude, what are you doing over there? Let me see. No. Bummer, man. I can't seem to find it. Oh, this. This shouldn't be this hard.
Is Zoom new for you guys?
I'm sorry.
Is Zoom a new platform for you all?
Yes. It's not like brand new, but it certainly is not. She'll probably be in there and just, oh, there she is. She made it. Okay, never mind. For the library, I mean, this is since COVID, we've been doing the whole Zoom thing, but prior to that, we didn't do it at all.
Yeah.
So
you had nothing virtual?
No.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. People came to the library all the time. Hi, Judy.
People used to come to the library all the time. When I first moved here, it was a waiting list to get into the kids' programs.
Yeah.
You'd have to like wait in line outside the library, and it would go up into the parking lot when it was on Parsippany Road there. I mean, and then my daughter used to intern at the library, and they used to always get the summer programs were incredible.
Oh yeah, the reading programs were crazy. All right, I'm going to start letting people in.
Okay. I forgot to sign up. I'm so stupid. Oh my God.
I don't know if you're stupid. That's kind of an exaggeration. All right. And we're waiting. Are we waiting for Ken also then?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
hope
Matthew's
so.
in charge of this one. I got him down as the solar man. So he's in charge. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I think we are just, should we wait for, or should we just not do that? Should we wait? 7:03.
It's up to Matthew.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm good. Good to get started.
Okay, so first things first, I'm going to make you the host so you can share. Everyone, if you do not have your mics muted, I would appreciate it if you could do that. We all know that this is solar energy. Matthew Cavanaugh is going to be our presenter. I'm going to keep an eye on if there's anybody else that wants to come in, and then we'll go from there. So take it away.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Happy to do the presentation here. So this is the Parsippany Green Team Library Series. This is a component of our education and outreach to the community. So we're sharing various topics about energy, wastewater, sustainable best practices in the town. And the mission of the Green Team is to collaborate with our residents, town government, and the community to identify programs that improve the quality of life and the physical, environmental, and financial stability of our community. And this is a program through Sustainable Jersey where the town is trying to get recertified in the Sustainable Jersey program. And basically the agenda for tonight is the intro to the Parsippany Green Team. We'll get into the history of how solar works, and then get into how it works from a science standpoint, as well as a little bit extra of the finer details. Talk about the types of solar, and then finally get into some of the benefits of solar. And the last thing we'll discuss is the storage of energy, because solar is an intermittent resource. It only works when the sun is shining. We'll discuss kind of the aspects of how you can get around that problem. So the introduction to the team, as I mentioned, I sent the mission statement. Our goal is to qualify through the combination of completing actions within the context of the Sustainable Jersey program to accumulate enough points this year to get bronze certification, which requires 150 points. Next year, our goal is 350 points, which would give us silver certification. And then in 2023, the goal is to get gold certification in energy, which is the pinnacle of the program, but it must take us a couple of years to get there because it's about greenhouse gas reductions. But across the program, Sustainable Jersey has 18 large categories that span from animals to people to food, energy, land use. You can see these categories here, which we've color coded. So there's something for everybody in the community to get involved in if they wish to. And we're going to be focusing in on solar, which falls into this category 7 of energy, this little gray box here. But as you can see, sustainability as a concept spans all aspects of society, all aspects of our town. And the Sustainable Jersey program has something for everybody. There's 150 actions across these categories. And if anyone wants to volunteer or be a part of it, we're more than welcome for new participants. So getting into the history of solar, the interesting thing is that it goes back way, way back to when people were using the sun for heating and lighting buildings. We're talking about BC times and back into the 1700s. Solar was used more and more frequently in different applications as the technology was innovating between the 1700s and the 1900s. But it really wasn't until the 1916 that the photovoltaic effect was proved experimentally. And in the context of this discussion, we're talking about photovoltaic solar. So this is solar panels as you typically would think about them. There's also concentrated solar and other aspects that we're not specifically discussing. This is something that you can put on your home or your building. So we're talking about solar photovoltaic. And basically this technology started to get invented and refined in the early 1900s and then basically became commercially available and widespread use in the early 2000s and onward. But NASA has been using this in their satellites since the 50s. And the first silicone PV cell was invented in 1954. The efficiency at that point of the solar panel was only 4%. We're going to get into the efficiency a little bit more, but kind of put that in context. Commercially available solar panels now are in the 18 to 20% range for efficiency. So the history has been around. It's been around a long time, and now really is a special age where the commercially available technology is cheap enough and it's available enough to actually impact our energy consumption and provide a solution for society. So just to get into how solar works, the science behind the solar, it really isn't that complicated from the standpoint of the science compared to a lot of other things. But basically you have photons of light that come from the sun. They come all the way from the sun. they impact with the solar material on the solar module and dislodge electrons in the chemistry of that solar module, which is created out of different kinds of materials, depending upon the solar technology. But when that electron gets dislodged, there's a very small voltage gap that develops across that specific gap. And it's about 0.5 volt or so, depending upon the technology. But then basically that little cell gets strung together with a bunch of other cells on the solar module, and you start to add those voltages together to create a greater and greater voltage on that solar module. So at the end, when you have the solar module and you have a positive and a negative, it takes into account it adds up all the voltages of those solar cells, and then you have anywhere from a 20 to 50 volt gap between the positive and the negative on a solar panel. And that ranges based on technology too, but basically you can think of these like a string of DC batteries where you're adding the voltages together. And similar to that, the solar panels then get strung together and connected, and then you add all those solar panels up and it creates an even bigger voltage. And when the sun is out, those electrons start moving and the voltage builds up, and you can have an electric current go through some source of load on the other side. So basically, the solar system works by turning light into electrons. Those electrons are then aggregated into a system which can be put on your house. So the sunlight will turn on any electrical loads that you have. And then anything that your house is not consuming when the sun is out. So at any given point in your house, you're using so much amount of power from your TV, your refrigerator, those sorts of things. So if the solar is producing more than you're consuming, it will go back out to the grid in grid connected systems. So when you install a solar system on your house, the utility will come and put what's called a bi-directional meter on, which means that electricity can flow into your house and electricity can flow out of your house. It's the same thing with commercial buildings or other installations, but a grid-tied system allows electricity to flow back and forth. So obviously when the sun is not shining, or it's dark out, or it's stormy, or it's cloudy, you're not getting electricity from the solar system, and you have to draw electricity from the grid for your meter. So most of the systems installed these days are called grid connected systems, and they go by a bi-directional meter and have net metering. So that's kind of the science behind the solar system. A lot of the solar modules now are made out of silicone and other materials, but they take light and they turn them into an electric current for you. And a solar system produces just DC current. So that's the same sort of flat, steady state current as a battery would produce. However, that has to get converted into alternating current in your house. So there's various electrical components called inverters, which basically take it from DC to AC, which then becomes usable in our typical electric grid. So you have to go through a conversion process, and there's many different ways to do that, including small inverters that get mounted on the back of the solar panels called microinverters, or you could aggregate it into a larger inverter for your house, or in large industrial solutions, they have massive inverters that are the size of, whole buildings or small buildings. So there's a lot of different ways to convert it, but ultimately it has to go from DC to AC power for your house. So a lot of people ask, in terms of how it works, what are the performance factors that are important for a solar system? And I've listed here some of the big ones, which are your orientation to the sun, the shade that the solar system sees, and then finally, where are you on the planet, right? Obviously, some areas in the planet get more sun than others, and some areas in the United States get more sun than others. So this map on the right-hand side shows the irradiance, which is the amount of energy per square meter based on your location in the United States. So you can see the Southwest here gets a lot of sun, so does the South. And then the Northeast, where we are, is kind of green, but it still has an abundant amount of energy from the sun to produce solar. It really isn't until you start getting into the northern latitudes where, you know, solar becomes less and less viable because there's just less sun available. But as you get closer to the equator, there's more sun available. And one of the reasons for that is that because as you get closer to the equator, the sun is higher in the sky for longer during the year, during the day, during the season. So, so basically, this is the irradiance map. So it very much depends on where you live, the amount of production you're going to get from a solar system. And then obviously, working back to number 2, the less shade you have, the better. This comes from Google's sunroof program, where you can literally plug in your address and it will show you whether or not your roof is good for solar. This light green yellow color means you're getting beautiful sun, like almost 100% sun with no shade. And then darker colors represent little to no shade or whatsoever. So Parsippany has a lot of trees, and I encourage people to look at this website to figure out, just if you're poking around and want to understand how your roof performs, you can go on here and you can look at the irradiance on your roof and the amount of shade that you have, basically. But ideal state is to have 0 shade. That means that your roof is unobstructed by any trees or any obstructions and receives sun for the viable amount of sunshine that's available. And then the other important factor is the orientation to the sun. So the solar panel produces the most when the sun rays are perpendicular to the solar panel. So the orientation of your house and the orientation of your roof in reference to where the sun is makes a big difference. And you can see this orientation map here where you're looking at the azimuth and the zenith of the roof. So that's the tilt to the sun as well as your direction, north, south, east, west, and the orientation. And somewhere, the sweet spot is typically somewhere around directly south. And depending upon the latitude you are on the planet, it could range anywhere from a 20 to a 70-degree tilt on the roof. In our specific area, the ideal orientation is directly south with a 30-degree roof pitch. That would be the most optimally performing system in our area. And depending upon the solar technology and the performance of the solar module and all these factors, you're going to produce a certain amount of energy for every watt of solar you install on your house. So it's not as easy as just saying, yeah, you're good for solar, or you're not good for solar. There's a lot of factors that go into it that play into ultimately the performance of the system, how much energy it will produce, and that's directly correlated to the benefit you receive from a monetary standpoint for that investment. So types of solar. In aggregate, from a system standpoint, there's grid connected, which we talked about. You're tied into the grid. You have a meter, a bidirectional meter, and then standalone systems or off-grid systems. And in each of these combinations, you can have a battery or you cannot have a battery. And then there's also hybrid systems. But basically, a grid connected system is kind of typically the bread and butter of where we are now. So you're still receiving power, the sun's not shining. But you also can benefit from the sun when it is shining. And from a solar module standpoint, there's primarily monocrystalline, polycrystalline, and then thin film solar modules. And the solar module, you know, has a very big impact on the benefit of solar to you, depending upon the technology and all those factors that we talked about before. As I mentioned, commercially available solar panels are in the 15% to 20% efficiency range, somewhere in there on average. But, you know, basically what that means is that 15 to 20% of the sun, the available energy from the sun that hits that roof, that hits that square foot, will be converted into DC electric energy. So you might say that's not that good. but actually the theoretical limit is somewhere in the 30 to 40% range for most technologies. But as you can see, this graph here shows you the different technologies, and this is from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Depending on the technologies from 1975 to 2015, it's all up and to the right, meaning that the technology continues to get more and more and more efficient. Some of the theoretical efficiencies are up in the 40%. Baseline, sort of the average is right here in the middle of the chart, between 15 to 20 or so. And the reason that this is pretty interesting is because we're only talking about the visible light spectrum that can be harnessed via current solar technologies. But some of the newer technologies and the more highly efficient technologies actually capture infrared, ultraviolet, and other aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum from the sun. So you can see down here in the right-hand side, visible light is between these two dotted lines. So most of the energy from the sun is in that space, and that is commercially available for tapping into now. But there's also a lot of research and development on how to tap into the other areas and the other aspects of available electromagnetic radiation from the sun. And that's kind of where it gets pretty exciting, because essentially you're dipping into creating more and more power per square foot from the total sun spectrum compared to where we are now. In some of the record-breaking solar cells, this is 1914, so this is actually pretty dated, but at that time was 46%. Some of the theoretical limits on nanotechnology and other aspects like that are getting into the 75 to 80% range or more. So the efficiency is very, very important, because it ultimately will determine how much energy, how much of the sun you can convert into electrical usable energy. So wanted to get into the benefits of solar. And one of the bigger benefits, I think, as everybody would understand, is that solar, from a life cycle carbon footprint. So we're talking about production, mining, resource use, and everything in between to end of life and recycling, has extremely low grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour of carbon emissions. The graph on the right here shows you versus coal, natural gas. Solar PV right here is the yellow one at 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. And then geothermal, wind, and biomass hydro are also very low. And the reason for this is that you have no fuel, so you have no supply chain. But more importantly, you're not burning anything to create some source of heat or electric energy. So you don't need a fuel like coal, oil, or wood to create electricity. You just get it directly from the sun. And the reason that's important is because we are in a situation today where climate change is a real thing, and reducing carbon emissions is a very important mechanism for us to minimize the impact from carbon. So that's one big benefit, that solar is clean. And then the second benefit is that solar is actually very safe. This is from Our World in Data, and it shows the death rates from energy production per terawatt hour. So you can see brown coal, oil at 18.4 deaths per terawatt hour, gas at 2.82 deaths per kilowatt hour, and then solar, wind, nuclear, and hydropower drop off exponentially from there. One of the reasons for this is that there isn't the environmental impact in some of the health risks that come along with the carbon emissions. And then another aspect is that you're just simply not doing as many things to produce that energy. You're not mining for as much. You're not running as many supply chains. There aren't as many hazardous moving parts. It's a very simple system compared to other electric generation means. So it's naturally just safer because there's not as much activity going on related to producing that energy. And then another benefit, which maybe a lot of people don't fully appreciate or understand, is that it has very, very low water usage. So typically a conventional thermal power plant will consume a lot of water. And the reason it does that is because it has to cool down the cycle as it goes through the thermodynamic process of turning fossil fuels into usable electric energy. And this is just the law of thermodynamics, that if you heat something up, you need to cool it back down to reuse it. So as you can see in the upper right-hand corner here, from our fresh water supply, a huge amount of that goes into cooling down thermal cycles for electric generation. And this is with a nuclear power plant, natural gas turbine, coal plant, a geothermal plant, a solar concentrating plant. You know, some of these use a huge amount of our fresh water to produce the electricity that we have. And solar, because it doesn't have a thermal cycle, doesn't use any water to cool itself down. It just uses the air. So you can see here in the bottom left-hand corner is a graph of the cubic meters per megawatt hour of lifetime energy output, and then the water intensity per electric generation means. So water is a scarce resource, or it's going to become even more important for us. And solar not only is clean, it's safe, but it also uses a lot less water than other means. So that's going to be important for society going forward. Another benefit of solar is that it's circular and sustainable. And solar modules are primarily made of glass and aluminum, and then they have some electronics, and there's a lot of chemistry inside of the solar cells. But an abundance of that is actually silicone, like I mentioned before. Silicone is made, the base elements are basically what's in sand. Silicone and quartz is something where silicone comes from. But it's, like I said, it's mostly glass and aluminum. And a lot of the good recycling processes can turn 95 to 98, sometimes even higher percentages of all the materials in the solar panel into reusable materials in a circular economy. And the way they do that is they take the solar back, they crush it up, they strip out the glass, they tear off the aluminum frames, and then they run everything else through a crushing cycle and process it chemically to reuse the rare earth metals or some of the chemistry inside of the solar panels. So the reason this is important is that if we're going to be more sustainable as a society, we need an electric generation means that doesn't need to continuously be harvesting the earth for more resources. And because solar is a renewable, a low carbon resource, it uses little to no water when it's actually running, and because it can be reused and the elements that are mined for it can be put back into society in a circular way, it's very renewable and very sustainable compared to the alternatives. And then one of the final benefits is that it's become extremely inexpensive compared to how it used to be. And I'll direct you to the bottom left-hand corner here, where in the 1970s, solar was about $100 per watt. And when you put a solar system on your house, it's measured in terms of watts. Watt is a unit of power, and the more power you put on the roof, the more energy you're going to produce. Kilowatt hour is the unit of energy that the watt produces. So dollar per watt is a pretty standard metric in the solar industry. And $100 per watt in the 1970s means that virtually nobody could afford this. That's why NASA was using it, and only NASA pretty much. But then from then until now, you know, we are down in the, you know, a very small, lower range, under $1 per watt, definitely under $1 per watt for most solar panels. So you can see 100-fold decrease across from 1970 until now. And the other interesting thing is that solar follows a learning curve, whereas, you know, some of the other means of electric generation have actually increased over time. Solar has decreased over time. And one of the reasons for that is that it has no fuel, and the efficiency of the panels has increased, as we talked about before. And the the aspects of all the costs that go into it have also reduced. So this graph here, the price of electricity from new power plants, is a really interesting chart. And this is only 2009 to 2019, but it shows the different ways that we generate power and the cost per megawatt hour for each of those means across that 10-year gap. You can see price of solar photovoltaic went from 359 per megawatt hour down to 40 per megawatt hour. Offshore wind also went down, but coal was kind of flat, nuclear went up, and then natural gas also came down, as well as solar thermal. But this dramatic decrease is due to the learning curve, it's due to not having a supply chain, and it's due to the science of increasing the efficiency of solar, meaning that it produces more power for every available space. And then also, you know, the cost of energy is measured as a levelized cost of electricity, LCOE. And that's kind of like the bread and butter of the industry, where you're comparing the sort of life cycle cost of the energy compared to everything else. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner that these are sort of the spectrum of the LCOE for different electric means and electric generation. Solar photovoltaic is this purple right here. The mean is the black in the middle. And this is from IRENA, from a cost alliance. And you can see that it's on par or competing with all of our conventional electric generation means. You have nuclear gas peakers, natural gas peakers, as well as coal plants. And then, you know, some of the more expensive ones include diesel off-grid solutions and those sort of things. But wind and solar, from a levelized cost of electricity and from a conventional dollar per watt value, have gone down significantly. And the reason that that's important is because it's becoming more and more available to more and more society as the costs come down. And the savings to a customer basically come from not having to buy electricity anymore because you're producing it yourself. Whether that's a home, a commercial building, a utility scale solar plant, or something else, basically, instead of getting the power from a power plant someplace far off or away from your house, you're getting the energy directly off of your rooftop. And one of the important reasons for that is that you're not only getting it directly off your rooftop, but you don't have any of the waste due to having to move electricity across all the power lines all the way from the power plant to your home. So costs have come down significantly, and you're seeing a lot of investment in solar, where now it's really at the point where it's becoming available to pretty much anyone that would like it. And then there's other programs like community solar and other things like that, which make solar available to people that may not have the benefit of a shade-free roof or don't have the benefit of having a roof at all. But another aspect that I wanted to share about the benefits is that it's extremely abundant compared to other means that we use to produce electricity right now. And I love this picture here, right here in the bottom right, which is the amount of solar energy that's available compared to other resources. So you can see coal, uranium, petroleum, natural gas, wind is here in green, but solar is this huge yellow bubble. And the little earths down here in the bottom left-hand corner are the amount of consumption that the whole world uses. I'm forgetting the exact number, but I can find it out. But basically, in 1 hour of sunshine, if you could capture all the irradiance and all the power from the sun in a single hour, it's actually less than an hour, you could power all of humanity for the entire year. So, you know, we talked about efficiencies, we talked about space, we talked about a lot of the constraints around that, but essentially, you know, that it doesn't require very much to harvest exactly what we need to power our planet. And as I mentioned, the sun is not going to go out anytime soon, so this is available to us without having to go find new resources or do anything else to produce it. And these are just some funny infographics there, but I wanted to mention something else too, I forgot. So the other good thing about the sun is that it's pretty much available anywhere. So if you wanted energy and you had the sun shining on you during the daytime, you could grab the energy, you could harvest it, you could store it for later use. And it's accessible. So no one really has a license to the sun, meaning that it is commercially available to people that want it where applicable. So, and then the final benefit of solar is that it's distributed. And again, like I mentioned, the point about the sun being available to anyone that has the sun. The benefits of that is that you can really start to challenge the conventional way that our electric grid works when you have energy available at the point of consumption. So our typical network here is in the bottom left-hand corner, which shows huge power plants producing energy, pushing that energy across 400 to 750,000 kilovolt lines. Those get stepped down through transformers and substations. Then they go down to 132 kV kilovolt lines, low voltage power lines. Then they go into other step down transformers, and those gray buckets that you see on the power lines, on the power poles, are transformers that take it from typically a 33 kilovolt to 11 kilovolt range and bring it down to the 240 that you see in your house. So all of that work has to go into getting that energy consumed in your household at 120 volts, 240 volts. When you put a solar system on your house and you attach it to a battery, you don't really necessarily need all of this, right? You can literally go off grid. And that opens up the opportunity where you get into the concept of distributed energy resources or distributed generation, meaning that entire cities or homes or businesses can pair up with an energy storage system and have adequate supply of energy when they need it. So that this adds resiliency during power outages. It adds a backup benefit to electricity where you need it. And it essentially, the centralized model that we have now is moving towards grid modernization, where all these new technologies, including solar, energy storage, you know, there's even aspects of having your car be a storage system for your home or a business. There's lots of interesting things that can happen. Oops, I'm in the chat here. So there's lots of extra interesting things that can happen when you have a microgrid or a off-grid situation, or you have distributed generation. And then one of the things I mentioned too is there's electrical losses through this entire network. So from the power generation all the way to the house, you're losing electricity because of the electromagnetics. When electrons move through a wire, they create an electromagnetic force around it. And some of the energy is lost in that force as well as lost in the heat. So you're losing energy all along this transformation cycle, and you have a lot less losses when it's not actually on your roof. So what was the question? I lost it. Okay, I'll take this question. Do you think the whole Southwest could supply energy to the whole country? Yes. Are batteries just for living off the grid? No. You can use batteries now and pair it with your solar system in your home and basically have power during outages. If I get my solar panels today, then pay them off in 15 years, do you think the technology would change too much? This would be very, very helpful in Texas. So I'll go back to this slide on efficiency. So some people ask this question, well, shouldn't I just wait until the solar panels are the size of a stamp and then buy in at that point? Well, the curve here is pretty gradual. I mean, this is from 1975 to 2015. So you're talking about, 12 to 14% up to 20, 16 to 20% as like commercially available solar panels. So waiting that time from 1975 to 2015, you could have installed and paid off 3 to 4 to 5 solar systems and had 100% return on investment in that time span, as opposed to just waiting for the newest technology. So, to answer the question in general, it's actually a good time to just invest in the technology, and then the system will pay itself off, assuming you have good sun, you have a good orientation, and all those other factors are aligned. Texas obviously has good irradiance compared to the Northeast, so it gets more sun. And I think I answered all the questions. So from the standpoint of like space, I'm forgetting the exact calculation, but it's a matter of, hundreds of square miles basically could produce enough energy to supply all of the United States. And I didn't do that calculation now, but it's just a function of the sunlight hitting a certain space, how much can be converted into electric energy, and then moving that energy from one place to the next. So, there's a lot of discussions about storage systems and what happens when the sun goes out. But there's also an interesting conversation about if the entire world was connected to each other through massive power grid systems, then the sun's always shining at some point on the earth, right? So you could have Africa supply us with power during the nighttime, or you could have East Asia supply the United States with power during the nighttime, or Europe, or whatever it is. Essentially, when the sun is on one side of the earth, you could move the energy from that side of the earth to the other. Or a complementary solution to that is being able to store the energy for use later. And so there's some interesting ways to think about when the sun is not shining, how do you actually supply electric energy? And one of those things, as I mentioned, was that creating a global network, a global grid, if you will, that can power things when they're off. And that's one solution. And then the other solution is storing it in some way for use later on. So there's an entire spectrum of ways you can store energy, from electrical, mechanical, chemical, gravity systems. And I can't really get into those. We have a separate discussion just on energy storage systems, but you basically have fuel cells, you have super cooled electrical storage systems, you have gravity systems like pumped hydropower or just lifting a block off of the ground. You have flow batteries, which is chemical energy. You have your typical sort of lithium ion battery, for example. And this shows you sort of the release time of available storage versus the storage capacity. And in terms of mature storage capacity right now, pumped hydro is very mature, and they have a lot of facilities which store energy by taking water, adding some energy and pumping up to a higher elevation. And then when you need that energy, you let the water flow back down through a turbine and you can harvest it. So pumped hydro is one of the most mature technologies, but you need a lot of space and you need a natural elevation gap to produce that potential energy. Essentially, this is a gravity system as opposed to a chemical or an electrical system. But there's flywheels, there's carbon storage systems, there's any number of different things that you can take energy while the sun is shining, put it someplace, and then use it when you need it during the nighttime or when there's power outages or when there's snow covering your solar system, like my house right now. So the interesting thing about the discussion of storage systems is that the cost of the storage system is very important because it's an additional feature you need for the intermittency problem of renewable energy. However, the cost of storage systems have dramatically come down over time, just like the solar learning curve, because it follows that learning curve. And again, you don't have a fuel source in a storage system for the most part. You're using a lot of the same stuff over and over again for 5, 10, 20 years. So storage costs have come down, solar costs have come down. And when you pair the two together, you now currently commercially available have a viable solution to produce clean energy on your home, at your business, and have enough to supply yourself during power outages, and add that resiliency factor. And similarly, entire towns can do this to basically have backup power. So, it's just a kind of a really interesting point in time to be at the nexus of all these technologies where you have abundant solar, you can harvest it, you can store it, and you can provide that resiliency you need to society, the grid, your house, whatever you're looking for. So that was my last slide. I can take questions now. I know I went through a lot of stuff, but we have another 15 minutes and I can take some questions.
So does anybody have any questions or any comments about the program, what they thought of it, which by the way, I thought it was excellent. A little too much information for me, but the best part is I'll be able to look at the recording and kind of study it, which is always helpful.
Sure.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Matthew, what is your thought about like JCP&L and PSE&G and Con Ed eventually making their grid not just from fossil fuels, but making them have the storage units from renewables and incorporating them. So eventually that we'll be getting even more renewable energy that way.
I mean, I can't.
Could that happen?
No, well, that's the evolution here is taking it from, taking a step back to this slide. Today's electricity comes from centralized power plants and gets distributed to customers. And the future grid is going to be smart. They call it a smart grid, which means that you're going to get energy stored from your car. You're going to get energy stored from solar systems. You're going to get energy during the day from microgrids and renewable energy that's available during the day. Coincidentally, typically wind is stronger at night. So when the sun's not shining, the wind is blowing. Kind of there's an interesting play on that. So at nighttime, you have wind energy more available than during the daytime. So, there's an evolution that's going to happen from an infrastructure standpoint to the grid of the future. And there's a lot of discussions about what that actually looks like and who's going to participate. But, ultimately, this is the direction it appears to be heading.
So I guess a lot of people we need to be educated, because and this is wonderful that you're doing this, because it helps people understand what's on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And it's exciting.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So the batteries that you would get if you went in that direction, the battery that you would purchase, I guess you purchase it?
Yeah, the battery could be purchased. Yeah.
And you would purchase from the solar company, or you would purchase it, is that like a separate item?
Yeah, some solar companies are offering it now, and some companies you could basically find an electrical engineer to help you pair it with the solar system and figure all that out.
Right.
The battery aspect to specifically around home storage is more of a new feature that's been available. But you'd have to do your due diligence on who offers that.
Okay, good to know.
So do you have that? If you have like a redirectional type, is that what you called it?
I don't have currently I don't have a storage system. So when the power goes out, if there was an outage, the solar system shuts off. And that's a safety feature so that it doesn't feed electricity back into the grid when the power utility workers are trying to put power back on.
Oh, yeah. Never thought of that.
So,
Yeah.
so right now, if the lights went out, my solar system, it's nighttime, they're covered in snow, would not power anything for me. So that's kind of where you're debating the reliability of the grid against the cost of the backup system. A lot of people have generators. So what's the cost of a generator, and are you ever going to use it? So some areas of the grid are more reliable than others in the United States, and that's just a feature of how it's built out, as well as the environmental aspects: winds, storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, heat waves, forest fires, floods. All of these things affect the reliability of the grid. So, and the interesting point about that is, if you have solar on your house and you have a storage system, then it doesn't matter what the grid is doing, right? Because
Mhm.
if the grid goes down, you still have power at your house. And that's the resiliency aspect that I'm talking about, and the sustainability aspect is that if you have a solution where you aren't dependent upon the grid, then you are independent, and you have peace of mind, and you can actually, know that you're going to have some energy for when the power's out. And that's why, right now there's a huge push for it in California because of the forest fires and other aspects like that. I know, right now, because of some of the winter storms, people are out of power and they don't have heat, so there's a lot of reasons why right now you don't necessarily have to put up with that.
Mhm.
It's good.
Yeah.
Very good to know. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.